Do you have a boyfriend? Michelle Reed's fingers tightened around the stack of quarterly reports she'd been organizing. She'd been working at Marcelli Enterprises for exactly 3 weeks, still memorizing the maze of marble corridors, still feeling like an imposter every time she knocked on the mahogany door of the executive suite. And now Rocco Venturi, the charming capo who made everyone in the building either blush or bow, was perched on the edge of her desk, asking her that question like he was discussing the weather. Michelle managed a small, uncertain laugh. Not yet. The instant those two words escaped her lips, the entire atmosphere shifted. Because Nicola Marcelli, the man who controlled the empire, who commanded respect with a single glance, whose very presence made grown men speak in whispers, emerged from his private office at precisely that moment. He stopped mid-stride in the corridor. His shoulders locked rigid, his jaw set into a hard line, his eyes, dark, dangerous, and burning with something Michelle couldn't name, fixed on her as though she detonated a bomb in the center of his carefully ordered world. It lasted perhaps 3 heartbeats. But Michelle felt every cell in her body respond, as if she'd crossed an invisible line drawn in blood. Rocco's grin widened. Tranquillo, capo. We're only making conversation. Nicola didn't acknowledge Rocco. His attention remained solely, devastatingly, on Michelle, and that stare alone made her forget how to draw breath properly. She had no explanation for why he looked furious, or possessive, or both. She reminded herself she didn't require his permission to have a personal life, though the honest truth was she'd barely had time for one since accepting this position. "Miss Reed," Nicola said, his voice a low rumble edged with barely restrained intensity. "My office." Immediately. Rocco raised his eyebrows, clearly delighted. "Ah, Madonna. Someone's jealous." Michelle nearly fumbled the reports. "No, stop. He's not." She waved her free hand, cheeks burning with mortification. It was just a simple question. Nicola didn't wait for her protests. He turned sharply on his heel and disappeared back through the doorway, the unspoken command hanging in the air like smoke. Rocco leaned closer, stage whispering loudly enough for half the floor to hear. "Don't be nervous, Tesoro. Jealous bosses? They're always the most entertaining." "Please stop talking," Michelle hissed, mortified beyond measure, and hurried after Nicola before her courage failed entirely. If this story touches your heart, subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Comment where you're listening from. And if you feel it was really worth it, consider becoming a member to get early access to upcoming stories. Your support makes all the difference. She closed the heavy office door behind her with a soft click that felt far too loud. Nicola stood near his expansive desk, arms folded across his chest, looking like a storm barely contained behind Italian tailoring and cold control. He didn't speak immediately. He simply watched her, the kind of observation that stripped away pretense. Michelle shifted her weight, unsure what to do with her hands, with the reports, with the sudden awareness that this room felt smaller than it had ever felt before. "You seem distracted," Nicola finally said, each word measured. "I'm not," she replied quickly, perhaps too quickly. Rocco was just being Rocco. That's precisely the problem. The words came out sharper than he'd intended. She could tell by the way his expression flickered, the brief moment where he seemed surprised by his own vehemence. Michelle saw him struggle to rein it back in, watched him close his eyes for a fraction of a second, seeking the control he was famous for. She took one careful step closer, emboldened by his uncharacteristic slip. "Did I do something wrong?" Nicola pressed his fingers to his temple, a gesture so unlike his usual commanding presence that it almost made him seem human. "No." A pause stretched between them, heavy with unspoken tension. "But you should avoid those kinds of conversations during work hours." She blinked, genuinely confused. "Conversations like what?" Nicola opened his mouth, then closed it again, clearly waging an internal war with the words that wanted to escape. For a man like him, powerful, decisive, always 3 steps ahead, the visible discomfort was nothing short of shocking. Michelle bit the inside of her cheek to suppress the smile threatening to break free. "Are you seriously upset because someone asked me if I have a boyfriend?" "No," he said immediately. Too immediately. "So you're not upset?" "I didn't say that either." Michelle had to turn away toward the window, pretending to study the city skyline stretching below them, anything to hide the small, incredulous laugh that slipped out. She'd never seen anyone react to her like this, certainly never someone like Nicola Marcelli, who treated boardroom negotiations like chess matches and won every single time. She didn't understand it yet. Didn't understand the danger humming beneath his careful words, the secret her own family history held, the reason his jealousy was rooted in something far more lethal than simple attraction. But she would. Soon enough, she would understand everything. And by then, it would be too late to walk away. The next morning, Michelle arrived at her desk to find a handwritten note on Marcelli letterhead. The penmanship was sharp, precise, unmistakably his. "My office. 8 a.m. Don't be late. NM." She glanced at her watch. She had 4 minutes. When she knocked and entered, Nicola was standing by the window, phone pressed to his ear, speaking rapid Italian that sounded like equal parts negotiation and threat. He gestured for her to sit without breaking his conversation. Michelle perched on the edge of the leather chair, hands folded in her lap, trying not to eavesdrop on words she only half understood. He ended the call abruptly, turned to face her, and got straight to business. "Effective immediately, you'll accompany me to all meetings." "Every single one." Michelle blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" "New security protocols," Nicola said, his tone brooking no argument. "There's been increased surveillance on the building. Certain individuals have been asking questions they shouldn't be asking. Until further notice, you stay within sight." "Within sight," she echoed, bewildered. "Mr. Marcelli, I'm an administrative assistant, not." "You're my administrative assistant," he corrected, something possessive flickering in his dark eyes. "Which means your safety falls under my responsibility. Non-negotiable." Before she could formulate a coherent protest, his office door swung open without warning. Rocco sauntered in carrying 2 espresso cups, grinning like he'd just won a bet. Perfect timing. "I brought caffeine for the happy couple." "Get out," Nicola said flatly. "Relax, Capo. I'm here on official business." Rocco set both cups on the desk, then turned to Michelle with theatrical sympathy. "So he's making you shadow him everywhere now?" "Madonna, that's commitment." Michelle's cheeks flamed. "It's a security protocol." "It's jealousy," Rocco interrupted cheerfully. "Dangerous, possessive, completely irrational jealousy." "Rocco," Nicola warned, his voice dropping to something lethal. "What?" "I'm just saying what everyone's already thinking." Rocco raised his hands in mock surrender, backing toward the door. "But hey, if the boss wants his pretty assistant glued to his side 24/7, who am I to judge?" The door clicked shut behind him. Silence settled like fog. Nicola picked up one of the espresso cups, took a deliberate sip, and met Michelle's stunned gaze over the rim. "He's wrong, you know." "About which part?" Michelle heard herself ask. His expression remained unreadable. "About it being irrational." And somehow, that answer was infinitely more unsettling than any confession would have been. By noon, Michelle understood what accompanying him to all meetings actually meant. It meant sitting 3 feet away while Nicola conducted business in 3 languages, watching the way his hands moved when he made a point, noticing how his jaw tightened when someone tested his patience. It meant being hyper-aware of every breath, every shift in his chair, Every moment his gaze landed on her instead of his paperwork. The office felt smaller with each passing hour. She was reviewing a contract on her laptop when Nicola stood abruptly and moved to the window. He stood there for a long moment, silent, scanning the street below with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "What is it?" she asked quietly. "There's a black sedan," he said without turning. "Third one this week. Different plates, same position across the street." Michelle joined him at the window, following his sightline. She could see the car unremarkable, anonymous. "Maybe it's nothing. Nothing is ever nothing in my world." He shifted slightly, and suddenly they were standing closer than appropriate, his shoulder nearly brushing hers. "They're watching the building, Michelle. Watching you." "Why would anyone watch me?" His expression darkened. "Because they know you matter to me now." The confession hung between them like exposed wire. Michelle turned to face him fully, and the movement brought them even closer, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes, smell the subtle scent of his cologne mixed with espresso and something uniquely him. "Stay attenta," he murmured, his voice dropping into Italian like it always did when his control wavered. "Tu sei mia responsabilità." "You are my responsibility." "Just your responsibility?" The question escaped before she could stop it. Nicola's hand lifted, almost involuntarily, his fingers hovering near her face as though he wanted to touch her but couldn't allow himself the luxury. "Michelle." A sharp knock shattered the moment. They stepped apart like guilty teenagers as Nicola's consigliera entered with urgent documents requiring signatures. Michelle retreated to her temporary desk in the corner, heart hammering, trying to focus on anything except the fact that her hands were trembling. She could still feel the ghost of his almost touch on her skin. Could still hear the possessive edge in his voice when he'd said Mia. "Mine." Outside, the black sedan remained exactly where it had been, patient and waiting. Michelle needed air. After 6 hours of suffocating tension in Nicola's office, she'd finally convinced him she could walk 2 blocks to the cafe without incident. He'd agreed with visible reluctance, extracting a promise that she'd return within 20 minutes. She'd been standing in line for barely 3 minutes when Rocco appeared beside her, all easy charm and knowing smiles. "Escaping the boss's watchful eye, are we?" "I'm getting coffee," Michelle said, though even she heard how defensive it sounded. "Of course you are." Rocco held the door open as they stepped outside with their orders, gesturing to a small table in the autumn sunshine. "And if I happen to suggest we sit for just a moment, you'd probably say no because you're terrified of what Nicola would do if he found us together." "I'm not terrified." "Tesoro, you should be." Rocco's expression shifted, something almost serious beneath the playful exterior. He's never been like this. Not with anyone. Before Michelle could respond, a shadow fell across their table. She looked up to find Nicola standing there, hands in his pockets, expression carved from stone. "Miss Reed, I thought it necessary to personally vet the security of this location." Rocco laughed outright. "Madonna, you followed her." "I'm ensuring protocol," Nicola said coldly, pulling out the third chair and sitting without invitation. His presence transformed the casual moment into something territorial and tense. Michelle opened her mouth to protest when she noticed Nicola's attention had shifted. His entire body had gone rigid, focused on someone across the street. A man in an expensive suit stood near a newspaper stand, phone to his ear, but his eyes were locked directly on their table. More specifically, on Michelle. Nicola's hand moved to rest on the table between them, close enough to Michelle's that it formed a barrier, a claim. "Rocco. You recognize him." Rocco's playfulness evaporated instantly. "Sal's lieutenant. Cristo." The man across the street smiled, slow, deliberate, calculated, then turned and walked away as though he'd accomplished exactly what he'd come to do. Nicola stood abruptly, his hand closing around Michelle's wrist with gentle firmness. "We're leaving. Now." "What just happened?" Michelle asked, letting him pull her to her feet. "They're not just watching anymore," Nicola said, his voice tight with barely controlled fury. "They're sending messages." And the message, Michelle realized with growing dread, had been about her. The walk back to the office was silent, tense, Nicola's hand remaining at the small of her back like he couldn't bear to lose contact. Once inside his office with the door locked behind them, he finally released her, only to pace like a caged predator, running his hands through his hair in a gesture of barely contained frustration. "I need you to tell me the truth," Michelle said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Why are they watching me?" Nicola stopped pacing, his back to her. "It's complicated." "Then uncomplicate it." He turned slowly, and the look in his eyes was raw, vulnerable in a way she'd never seen. "I told myself I was protecting you. That keeping you close was about security protocols and threat assessment." He took a step toward her. "But Rocco was right. It's jealousy, Michelle. Irrational, overwhelming, completely unprofessional jealousy." Her breath caught. "Nicola, the moment I heard you say, 'not yet,' to him, something in me snapped. Another step closer. I've spent 3 weeks trying to convince myself it was about your safety. But the truth is, I can't stand the thought of anyone else asking you those questions, looking at you the way I do, wanting." He stopped himself, jaw clenched, fighting for control. Michelle closed the distance between them herself this time, her heart hammering so loudly she was certain he could hear it. "The way you do what?" "Christo, Michelle." His hand finally made contact, fingers sliding along her jaw with devastating gentleness. "The way I want you." The air between them crackled with 3 weeks of suppressed tension. His thumb traced her lower lip, his eyes dark with intention and restraint warring in equal measure. She leaned into his touch, rising slightly on her toes, her hands finding the lapels of his jacket. "Then stop fighting it," she whispered. Nicola's other hand came up to cradle her face, tilting her head up as he bent toward her, their mouths a breath apart. The door burst open with such force it slammed against the wall. Rocco stood in the doorway, face pale, chest heaving. "Capo, we have a serious problem. There's someone in the lobby demanding to see you." His eyes flicked to Michelle with something like apology. Demanding to see her. Nicola's entire body went rigid, his hands dropping from Michelle's face as cold fury replaced the heat of moments before. "Who?" "Sal himself." Nicola had Rocco escort Sal out with a message Michelle didn't hear, then summoned his consigliere, Vincent, a silver-haired man with sharp eyes who'd been with the Marcelli family for 30 years. They sat across from Michelle in the now-dark office, the city lights casting long shadows across Nicola's face. "Your mother's maiden name was Castellano," Vincent began without preamble. "Does that mean anything to you?" Michelle's stomach dropped. "My mother never talked about her family. She said they were complicated." "Complicated is charitable," Vincent continued. "Your grandfather, Dominic Castellano, was a high-ranking member of the Sal's organization 15 years ago. He witnessed something he shouldn't have, testified in a federal case that destroyed half their operation. He went into witness protection," Nicola added, his voice quiet but firm. "My father brokered the deal. Part of the agreement was that any descendants would be monitored, protected if necessary." Michelle's hands trembled. "My mother died 3 years ago. I thought that was the end of it." "It should have been," Vincent said. "But 6 months ago, Sal discovered your existence. Your location. Your new name. That's why I hired you," Nicola admitted, and Michelle heard the weight of confession in his voice. "Not because of your credentials, though those were legitimate. Because I needed you somewhere I could protect you. Somewhere I could see you every single day and know you were safe. The room tilted. You've been lying to me this entire time? I've been keeping you alive. Nicholas stood, moved toward her. Everything else, what I feel for you, that was never part of the plan. Vincent cleared his throat diplomatically. I'll give you two a moment, he said, and departed with quiet efficiency. Michelle stood on shaking legs, anger and fear and something else warring inside her. You should have told me. I know. Nicola reached for her hands, and this time she didn't pull away. I know, Kara. But if I had, you would have run. And I couldn't, I can't lose you. You don't have me, she whispered, but her fingers tightened around his. Don't I? When he kissed her, it was nothing like the gentle, almost moment from before. This was desperate, claiming, 3 weeks of restraint shattering completely. Michelle's hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer, and his arms came around her like fortress walls, protective and possessive and absolutely unbreakable. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Nicola pressed his forehead to hers. You're mine to protect now, he murmured. And God help anyone who tries to take you from me. They had exactly 40 minutes of peace before Rocco returned, this time with Vincent trailing behind him. The expression on both their faces made Michelle's newfound sense of security evaporate instantly. Sal's not backing down, Rocco said without preamble. He's made 3 calls in the last hour, to journalists, to certain family associates, asking very specific questions about Michelle's connection to Dominic Castellano. Vincent nodded grimly. He's building a case to expose her publicly. If he succeeds, every enemy your father ever made will know exactly who she is and where to find her. Nicola's jaw tightened, his hand finding Michelle's instinctively. Timeline. Tonight, Vincent said. There's a gala. The Marcelli Foundation's annual fundraiser. Every major family will be in attendance, including Sal's people. If he's planning to make a move, that's where he'll do it. Maximum visibility, maximum damage. Then we don't go, Michelle said quickly. We stay here where it's safe. That's exactly what he wants, Nicola countered, his strategic mind already working. If we hide, we look weak. Guilty. Like we're confirming the connection. He turned to face her fully, his expression resolute. But if you walk in there on my arm, publicly, as my guest. You're claiming her, Rocco finished, something like respect in his voice. In front of everyone. Making it clear that anyone who touches her answers to you. Michelle's heart hammered. Nicola, that's declaring war. No, Kara. His thumb traced her cheekbone with devastating gentleness. That's declaring you're under Marcelli protection. Officially. Irrevocably. He paused, searching her eyes. But I won't force this. If you want to run, I'll help you disappear. New name, new life. Somewhere Sal will never find you. Without you, she realized. Without me, he confirmed, and the pain in his voice was visceral. Michelle thought of her mother's silence, the secrets that had poisoned her entire childhood, the way fear had kept them isolated and alone. She thought of Nicola's kiss, still burning on her lips, and the way his protection felt less like a cage and more like coming home. What time does the gala start? Relief and something fiercer flooded Nicola's expression. 8 o'clock. Then I need a dress, Michelle said, her voice steadier than her hands. And maybe some warning about what I'm walking into. Nicola pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her temple. You're walking into a war, Tesoro. With me. The ballroom of the Grand Marcelli Hotel glittered like a constellation brought to earth. Crystal chandeliers, champagne towers, men in tailored tuxedos and women in designer gowns worth more than Michelle's yearly salary. When she stepped through the entrance on Nicola's arm, wearing a midnight blue dress that Vincent's assistant had somehow procured in under 3 hours, the room didn't just notice. It stopped. Conversations halted mid-sentence. Heads turned in synchronized curiosity. Michelle felt the weight of 100 gazes assessing, speculating, calculating what her presence on Nicola Marcelli's arm meant for the delicate power structures that governed their world. Nicola's hand settled possessively at her waist, pulling her closer. "Breathe, Kara. You belong here." "I feel like prey," she whispered. "You're not prey." His lips brushed her ear. "You're mine. There's a difference." They made it 20 feet into the room before a man intercepted them, sleek suit, calculated smile, eyes like winter ice. Michelle had never seen him before, but Nicola's entire body went rigid with recognition and barely suppressed hostility. "Marcelli," the man said smoothly, his accent carrying the cadence of old Sicilian families. "And this must be your lovely companion." His gaze slid to Michelle with predatory interest. "Miss Reed, is it? Or should I say, Miss Castellano?" The blood drained from Michelle's face. The man's smile widened. "Ah, I see the resemblance now. Your grandfather had the same eyes, beautiful, but they always looked like they were hiding something." He leaned in slightly, his next words spoken in Italian, but clearly intended for both of them. "I figli pagano per I peccati dei padri." The children pay for the sins of the fathers. Nicola moved with lethal grace, positioning himself partially in front of Michelle, his arm an iron band around her waist. "Touch her, speak to her, even look at her again," he said, his voice deadly calm, "and I will personally ensure you regret every breath you take afterward." The man raised his hands in mock surrender, backing away with that calculated smile still in place. "Just delivering a message, Marcelli. From friends who remember." When he disappeared into the crowd, Michelle felt herself trembling. Nicola turned her to face him, both hands cradling her face with fierce tenderness. "Listen to me," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Tu sei mia. You're mine. Not theirs to threaten, not theirs to touch. Mine." And somehow, in that moment, belonging to him felt like the only safety left in the world. They'd managed 30 minutes of careful navigation through conversations and veiled political maneuvering when Michelle saw Rocco cutting through the crowd with unmistakable urgency. His face had lost all its usual charm, replaced by something that looked dangerously close to panic. "Capo," he said quietly, leaning in close enough that only Nicola and Michelle could hear. "We have a catastrophic problem. Sal just released everything to the press, photos, documents, the full Castellano connection. Every major outlet has it. Every person in this room has it." Nicola's expression went cold as winter. "When?" 2 minutes ago." Rocco's eyes flicked to Michelle with genuine sympathy. "It's already trending." As if choreographed, Michelle watched phones emerge from pockets and clutches across the ballroom. Screens lit up faces in blue-white illumination. Then came the whispers, soft at first, then building like a tide, spreading from cluster to cluster until the entire room buzzed with her name, her grandfather's crimes, her supposed deception. "Castellano. Witness protection. Marcelli's assistant? Does he know?" Michelle felt the floor tilt beneath her expensive heels. "Nicola, I need to leave. Now." "No." His hand caught hers, firm and grounding. "We don't run. They're looking at me like I'm—" "You are under my protection," Nicola said, his voice carrying the absolute authority of a man who had never backed down from anything in his life. "And everyone in this room is about to understand exactly what that means." He turned to face the crowd fully, and the whispers died as if he'd commanded silence itself. His hand remained locked with Michelle's, his stance radiating defiant ownership. Several attendees raised phones, capturing the moment that would be dissected in boardrooms and back channels for months to come. Nicola didn't speak. He simply held Michelle's hand tighter, lifted his chin in clear challenge to anyone who dared question his choice, and began walking toward the exit. Not fleeing, walking. Every step measured, deliberate, a man escorting something precious through hostile territory. The crowd parted like water. At the doors, Nicola paused, turned back once to survey the room of powerful families and dangerous players, and delivered his message without a single word. She's mine. Touch her and face the consequences. Then he led her into the night, leaving chaos and speculation in their wake, his hand never once releasing hers. Outside, Vincent had a car waiting. Michelle was trembling, but Nicola's grip remained steady. "Where are we going?" "Somewhere safe," he said. "Somewhere that's ours." The villa sat 20 miles outside the city, hidden behind iron gates and stone walls that had witnessed centuries of Marcelli's secrets. Security cameras tracked their approach, but once inside, the world felt impossibly distant, all terraced gardens and ancient olive trees, moonlight spilling across Mediterranean architecture that spoke of old wealth and older protection. Nicola led her through rooms that had never appeared in any architectural digest, past artwork worth millions, until they reached a private terrace overlooking the dark expanse of his land. He finally released her hand, only to pour 2 glasses of wine with slightly unsteady fingers. "You don't have to stay," he said quietly, handing her a glass. "I meant what I said before. I can make you disappear, give you a life where none of this touches you." "Without you," Michelle repeated his earlier words. "Without me." He took a long drink, then set the glass down as if he couldn't trust himself to hold it. "I need you to understand something, Michelle. I hired you to protect you. That part was calculated, strategic, the kind of move my father would have made." He turned to face her fully, and in the moonlight she saw every wall he'd built crumbling. "But keeping you, wanting you near me every moment, losing my mind when Rocco looked at you, nearly starting a war tonight, that was never strategy. That was me falling in love with you despite every rule I'd set for myself." The wine glass trembled in Michelle's hand. "You love me." Desperately, Nicola confessed, stepping closer. Dangerously. The kind of love that makes a man claim a woman in front of his enemies and dare them to do something about it. Michelle set down her glass before she dropped it. "I should be terrified. Are you?" She thought about her mother's life, lived in shadows, controlled by fear, dying without ever truly being known. Then she thought about tonight, Nicola's hand in hers, walking through that ballroom like she was something worth protecting, worth claiming, worth everything. "No," she whispered. "I'm not." Nicola's hands framed her face with reverent gentleness. "Stay with me. Not as my assistant, not as my obligation. Stay as mine fully, completely, without secrets or protection details or anything except the truth between us. The truth being that you're possessive, controlling, and absolutely insane? Among other things." His thumb traced her lip. "Do you have a boyfriend, Michelle Reed?" She smiled against his touch, remembering where all of this had started. "Not yet," she whispered, then kissed him. "But I think I'm about to." When he kissed her back, it felt like coming home to a place she'd been searching for her entire life. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Comment where you're listening from. And if you felt it was really worth it, consider becoming a member to get early access to upcoming stories. And if you felt this story was really worth listening to, click the Super Thanks button. Your gesture makes all the difference and helps us continue creating stories that touch the soul.